Hi, this is Eben Freeman at Tailor Restaurant in New York City. I'm going to talk today about some of the developing trends in the drinks industry and cocktail industry today. The restaurant is owned by Sam Mason. I worked with Sam at WD-50 and previously at a restaurant called Paladin. So we have over a 10-year relationship and a very collaborative relationship. What we've tried to do here is sort of blur the lines between what is a sweet dish and what is a savory dish, and also between what is beverage and what is food. It's been a trend for some time for bartenders to begin to collaborate with chefs and work together on projects, and so Sam and I have done that for some time. People had really never infused with bread, and still I had learned it from Sam, who was using it to infuse his creams and his ice cream and make things like cornbread ice cream. We make a pumpernickel raisin Scotch, in which the easiest way to do it was just to cut the crusts off of pumpernickel raisin bread and steep them in the Scotch. We also toast a little bit of caraway seeds for a nice caraway finish on it. But that's a flavor that I consider a very sort of New York flavor. He made a beet sangria that we ended up turning into a cocktail by fortifying it a bit with brandy and triple sec. But the initial idea was his, and he started out with wine and things like that. He made a bell pepper lemonade in which I put alcohol into it and made an alcoholic beverage, but the genesis, the idea really was his. And so we're constantly working in that direction, and also coming in contact with new flavors and new ways to bring flavors forward, such as cedar that we're working with, which previously hadn't really been used except on salmon was put on cedar planks. So that was sort of the genesis of the idea. Now it's come forward as it's now thought of as an edible flavor, and then we put it into bourbon and made it a liquid flavor as well. Putting flavors that previously weren't in spirits before, like cedar, like pumpernickel raisin, is something that's really people have responded to. Bartenders have to respond to new products coming out. A new product coming out, in my field was a allspice dram that was brought in by a guy named Eric Seed, who's a very small importer of specialty spirits. Everyone in my field of cocktails, therefore, ended up making their drink with that flavor, and it becomes interesting to go and see who does better with that flavor. And that's always been part of the game as a bartender, is I'm going to take the flavor and I'm going to make the best representation to it. You've got a product like Slow Gin coming out from Plymouth, and I can tell you now that it's going to be really interesting to see every cocktail bar. The Slow Gin is just coming in now. They're going to develop drinks with it, and who is going to do the best job of understanding and using or manipulating that flavor is definitely part of the game. I tend to say, no, I'm not going to do that, because I have different flavors that you don't have, and different flavors, ideas to play with that nobody else has. All the cocktail geeks want to come in and say, make something with Saint Germain. That's a product that I don't use at all behind the bar. I used elderflower flavor long before Saint Germain came out. I think it's a great product, but it's a flavor that I don't necessarily think needed to be made alcoholic, because elderflower syrup is quite strong and intense in very small amounts, and therefore I don't need an alcoholic base. And I want to say, I don't have that, but I do have elderflower, and I'll make a drink with you with elderflower. Or how about, try something else like pumpernickel raisin or cedar, or cornbread bourbon or something like that, which you're not going to see packaged and marketed anytime soon. For some time now, we've been somewhat mired in classics in the cocktail world, which is a very important step, but I think that people really now are looking to move forward. People are starting to get over the fears that they had after 9/11, which caused them to be sort of nostalgic and hold on to comfort food and things like that, and they're really interested in, since they feel that they're entering this new age of iPhones and all sorts of business, they want their food and their drink to represent those ideas as well. Making your own bitters, making your own sodas, different tinctures, different infusions are very popular right now. It's a very Victorian sort of idea that's also very popular right now. Seems like a contradiction, but at the same time, it makes a lot of sense. If you think about Victorian times also were this age of crazy invention and things like that, where people were doing all sorts of, all sorts of industrial age experiments and things were going on. So in a way, it sort of makes sense. trends. It's interesting, I think, to have that sort of classical framework in which you're doing really progressive, interesting things. And so we did start making our own sodas and our own tinctures, which, as I said, was a very Victorian sort of idea. So what we do here is what we consider progressive cooking. Some people label what is going on here as molecular gastronomy, and neither Sam nor I really like that term. We think of things as progressive, more as a reaction to the classicism that has gone on before, and trying to be a little bit more forward thinking and push new ideas forward. Health is very big, as I said, even in my field. People who are cocktail geeks and people who are going out to have cocktails who don't think they have any interest in health benefits, you'd be surprised how strongly they respond to when I put things like dandelion or burdock or rosehip. When those words are on drinks, people really respond strongly. Not only because they say, oh, this is, a flavor I haven't tried before, but it's also part of their brain, even though they're not conscious of it, is saying this is a healthier way of drinking. I trace it back really to the whole carb craze in which everybody suddenly didn't want carbs. People who previously had drank vodkas and cranberries and vodkas and orange juice started drinking vodkas and soda. And vodka and soda is probably the #1 call in most bars these days, because people don't want to see anything in their drink or taste anything. They don't want to be reminded that they're drinking in a way, and they want to feel that that's healthy. Now, most of that came from people who were dieting, who cared about their figure and their looks, so it's sort of a superficial sort of health, but at the same time, it was a health concern. Then you saw the whole Red Bull and vodka craze that came around, which I really couldn't understand, because all the tests were telling you how bad it was to ingest that much caffeine. But you realize that when people drank that drink, which is super caffeinated and lots of vitamin B in it, they actually felt good. But what really sort of brought it all around to me is that I had worked in a place with it and couldn't get the smell out of my hands, out of my nose after a night of making these drinks all night. I was trying to put my finger on what that smell was when somebody explained to me that it was the smell of St. Joseph's aspirin, these little pink chewable aspirin made by St. Joseph. And the flavor in that aspirin is exactly the flavor in Red Bull. The reason you see that that's the #1 of these sort of energy drinks still today is that there is, not only are people believing that the taurine and the vitamin B are good for them, but what they've really touched upon is not only do you feel better at the end of the drink, but that flavor is something that makes you feel better, because as a kid you remembered that flavor and then you're going to feel better. Definitely. I mean, the whole phenomenon of the green apple martini is, in a way, something that really did influence my work, because that's when I really started to understand that whole idea of sense memory and flavor, and that flavor was tied in with Jolly Rancher candies. I went to this thing they call their flavor sensorium, in which you try a lot of different things and different flavors, and they had a sparkling beverage flavored with bubblegum. I'm just a little bar in SoHo. I can make that flavor, and it's rare that I find someone, they may find the drink too sweet, but it's rare that they don't at least have a smile on their face and realize I've never had this flavor in liquid form, let alone the naughty pleasure of having it in alcoholic form. One that illustrates this quite well is we did a cedar bourbon. People would drink the cedar and some people's reaction would be like, wow, this reminds me of my grandmother's house. Other people react strongly and say, this reminds me of a hamster cage. I had a hamster cage with cedar shavings in it, so this brings me back to that period in my life. Other people are like, wow, this is like a sauna flavor and this reminds me of sauna. So it's interesting that when you have people drinking, you're automatically opening them up. They're becoming more receptive and letting their guard down. If you can then touch upon one of these flavor emotional areas, they really have such a profound reaction to it. You can do something without them knowing it. If you put a flavor in a drink and people are there like, I know that flavor, and they're having some connection to it, or maybe they just say, I don't know what it is, but I love this drink. If you were to talk to those people, you'd find that that flavor represented something to them, and that's why they had such a strong affinity to it. I talked once about how I wanted to make a cocktail with Coppertone in it. I couldn't actually put Coppertone into the drink, but I knew that that flavor, for me, represented summer. And if I didn't tell you there was Coppertone in it, you probably wouldn't you know, you wouldn't be as scared of it. You'd drink it and you'd say, wow, there's something here that I don't know what it is, makes me think of summer. Then when you realize that it was copper tone, if I told you, that whole reaction would be that much more cathartic and involved for you when you realized what it is and would take you back and why you responded to it. So that's an interesting thing to play with. It's also an interesting thing to play with people's perception of things. An example of which being the solid cocktails that we do. So that when you tell them, I'm going to make you this, and they have a very set idea of what that is, and you bring out something that looks completely different than what they expect, their immediate reaction is, no, this is not that thing. But then when they try it and realize the flavor or even the sensations are exactly what that thing is, that suddenly becomes even the more true example of their original idea, because it's transcended that. They've had such more of a profound experience of that flavor. It's like they're having it for the first time all of a sudden. Because when they were going to have their rum and coke, which they have all of the time, they wouldn't be much thought put into it. So that when you ask them to think about it and then to open themselves up to the experience of it, if you're able to pull it off, as I say, it's a much stronger relationship they have with the new thing than the old thing by giving them new forms. This is sort of the outgoing flight of solids here. We're actually just about to launch some new ones, but this is the flight that's really been photographed quite a bit. This is the first idea that we had. This is actually a rum and coke, our Cuba Libre, which is a classic drink made with rum and coke and garnished with lime. It sits on top of a lime chip. You freeze the lime, you slice it very thin on a deli slicer, meat slicer. You dip it into some simple syrup and you bake it in a convection oven until it's crisp. So it's actually quite crunchy. And you not only do you get the flavor of lime that's part of the cocktail, but it becomes a coaster in really the delivery system. I wanted to capture the bubbles that are trapped inside the gelatin, actually fool the tongue into feeling that it is effervescent. The next one that we do is a Ramos Gin Fizz Marshmallow. Ramos Gin Fizz is a classic cocktail of New Orleans, which is basically gin and lemon and lime, orange blossom water, egg white, and sugar. And when you make this drink properly, you shake it until it's almost a meringue. There's so much foam in it. And I thought, if you can make a meringue, why can't you make a marshmallow out of it? We were able to develop this marshmallow that is made with all of those ingredients that I just listed. We then dust in a little bit of juniper sugar just to reinforce the gin flavor. But again, there is alcohol content in that. And for people who know the cocktail texturally, it should really make sense. The last one is sort of an idea of texture in drinks. Bubble tea was sort of the start of texture in drinks. Previously, we didn't want any little bits in our drinks at all. The Rice Krispies, again, were stolen from Sam. Sam made peanut butter Krispies that he served with a celery sorbet, sort of reversing the texture of a classic ants on a log. And so I thought of using Rice Krispies, and what we do is we toss it in Kahlua and then put it in a dehydrator till it's crisp again, then take them out and toss it in Kahlua a second time so it gets 2 coats, and then dehydrate it again so it's still a crispy cereal. And then we add vodka milk, which is just actually vodka and half. And then we serve that really just as a shot for people to take down in one sip. And again, there's sort of a perverse notion of having alcohol for breakfast that people really respond well to. But these have been very popular. We've done about $8,000 worth of business in these in the last 6 months as part of our percentages of our beverage program. It's impressive how many of these we've sold. Another example we have that's gained a lot of popularity that's going to be on our new set of solids is these absinthe gummy bears. Again, this is somewhat of a subversive idea I think that people respond to, and that it's absinthe, which is, reported to be in a hallucinogenic liqueur in a candy form. So that idea of having candy or something childish that's also naughty at the same time, I think people really respond to. When this hit the internet, it really blew up and people were running in trying to figure out how they could get these. And so we realized we're going to have to put these on solids and figure out a way that we can sell them. But again, using classic cocktails really makes sense because people have a real framework and reference that they're already mired in. And when I bring these out, they get completely confused. And hopefully, again, when they do taste them, that experience is that much more profound because it's in a different form than they're used to.